Welcome to tonight's virtual tour and talk for the latest Cerulean Arts Collective exhibition, running through January 15th. And it features the work of Laura Eyring, Noreen Garrity, Alicia Mino Gonzalez, Sean Hildreth, and Keith Leitner. So as I said, the show's up through the 15th. We hope you can come and see it. And what? Closed. Oh yes, and we we will be closed from the 25th through the 4th.
Open by appointment.
And we're open by appointment. So and we're open through this Friday or Saturday, Christmas Eve. So you can always come in. And we are recording this so you can watch it later, send it to your friends. So I'm going to spotlight Tina's video. She's going to walk through the show and we're going to visit each artist and each one will speak their piece. And the first artist we're going to see is Sean Hildreth. Hello, Sean.
Hello, everybody. It's awesome to be here with all these inspiring artists. Thank you, Mike and Tina, for this opportunity to talk about the artwork. I'm Sean. I used to be in the Northeast Philly area, but now I'm in Ewing, New Jersey. And the series of work for this show is sort of a combination of 3 different techniques that I'm trying to experiment with a little bit more. One of them being painting, which is something I'm the most comfortable with. And then the other 2 are printmaking, which would be silkscreen for this series, and then paper marbling. So paper marbling was something I've never tried before. And I've seen some artists use it, and I've been very briefly dabbling into the history of paper marbling. But this whole series is an attempt to try to bring those 3 ideas together, and using the symbolism of windows into other worlds and other experiences. So a lot of the smaller works are sort of framed in gray marbled paper, and then it reveals itself to sort of these windows through into celebrations of color. So I saw these as just kind of like very organic, flowing, free-flowing worlds of color. Some of them may take on sort of abstracted groups of people or abstracted crowds. And then we zoom out and there's this sort of stone marbleized frame that is surrounding that. So I was trying to use paper marbling as a tool to sort of juxtapose sort of frozen gray tone, gray world, monochromatic, next to sort of vibrant, celebratory, free-flowing experiences of paint. And this is the first time I've ever really tried it out. So I'm excited about this as a beginning step into some future paintings and future series. And paper marbling is what a world, man. The TikTokers make it look so easy, I'll tell you that. It's fascinating. So I'm excited to keep going with that. And the idea is going off of my last show with Cerulean. I was using a series that I was calling the Shapes of Supremacy. So the idea of trying to visualize systems of either advantage or disadvantage, while here I'm trying to navigate maybe worlds of celebration and worlds of diversity right next to worlds of gray tone. So the idea of I don't see color, or I don't see others' experiences, or I don't necessarily see the things you're seeing, so I'm safe. But maybe that's not the case. Maybe you're missing out on things. Maybe you're missing out on sort of these parties of celebration of experiences. And those were some of the ideas I was having when trying to come up with these paintings. So peekaboos into almost like party atmospheres, but trying to frame it in a way where you're outside of those windows. You're either choosing to stay in, or you're sort of locked out from your own choosing. This one is a totally new thing where I squeegeed paint on the surface and then did a silk screen framed window around each natural squeegeed moment. And I'm really excited about what I can do with this in the future, the idea of squeegeeing patterns and then working back around them. I think there's a lot of opportunities to sort of shake these kinds of techniques up a little bit. And coming from my past experiences with paintings, I used to be somebody who would basically finesse a painting of a doorknob for hours. And that was the kind of, painter I really was. I would look at a doorknob essentially and really try to meticulously paint it. So this is a whole new world for me. The idea of mixing paper marbled things with abstracted squeegee moments. It's really fun though, because I've always admired windows. I've always really enjoyed windows as a motif. The possibilities of windows is just something I think is endless. They're just a very sort of magical thing that I appreciate out in the world. And I used to appreciate them in a very realistic way. And I think this kind of new way of thinking about how to use paint, how to use paper, marbled paper, it's sort of shaking up how I might have new paintings or relationships to something I've always loved. I've always loved windows, but I'm excited to maybe love them in a new way, in a strange way, if that makes any sense. And then this is a very specific series of work. So these were all taken from Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthplace, his house in Atlanta. So I took a trip for school this summer and we visited his birthplace. And this was sort of the conception of the idea of having windows, but looking through to something else. This one's called Stargazing. And I like this idea that it almost reminds us of a porthole. It was this very interesting, very marbled looking window on his porch. And I like the idea of trying to, swap in a more surrealistic look into that window. Another experimental moment there with a bunch of paint pours and dyes and watercolor, things I've never really used together before. While also still trying to tap into the things that I really enjoy, doorways, windows. This was, I believe, the front door or the side porch door with a screen. And I'm also thinking a lot more about Rene Magritte in terms of thinking about these surrealistic portals and doorways and how to use imagery and material to sort of maybe hold the viewer for a little bit longer. So those are things I'm thinking about with this MLK Birthplace series. And I guess these are the opposite of those other paintings because this is showing you something realistic from the outside. But if you look at it in a different way, there's something way more magical happening on the inside and then on the interior. So it's sort of flipping that logic of framing a marbleized world that is missing out on celebrations outside, while this is seeing something for what it is, but maybe missing it for what it could magically be on the inside from another perspective. And then the other thing that I think this series is helpful to show is I'm also trying to push myself with silkscreen. So I was not a great printmaking student. I was probably the quintessential example of what not to do in a printmaking class. I was very impatient with every single technique. So silkscreen has been something I'm trying to pick up on in one of the classes I teach in the middle school where I work. And it's been really fun trying to push my own limits. So this is actually a silkscreen with relief print for the moon, but just trying to get a couple passes. This is the MLK house. This is the entire house, but sort of changed in a surrealistic nightscape. And the idea of those celebrations happening inside is a continuous theme. Trying to collage more as well. So silkscreen with collage, creating some marbled curtains. So these are just sort of the ideas and the beginnings of ideas that I'm hoping to continue to work with more. And then this is the doorway at the Stonewall Inn. So the idea of also highlighting specific doorways and windows from history and trying to use those spaces. So not just painting any door or any window, but trying to maybe pick some specific landmark moments from history to use for these surrealistic landscape slash little window doorway portraits. I don't know if you wanted to open up any questions. I guess now you could.
Yeah, if people have questions, they can put them in the chat and I can field them. Sean, I have a question for you, or maybe an observation, that your first couple shows were very personally focused on your family, home, and objects. And so you've moved from that to like a more socially conscious point of view. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I feel like it has to do with a couple of things. One, just where I was living. So being in that environment and in that space that I was making paintings about, it made sense to make paintings about that. So I had a much more personal connection just inherently from living in it and with those subject matters. And then last year's show, I specifically was talking about how with the events of 2020 and going through the pandemic, it sort of took me a while to really soak in all the events that we lived through and are living through, and the ideas and the things that a lot of folks around the country are learning or unlearning or orienting themselves to. And I was doing that for myself as an individual, but I was also having conversations, with family and with the people who I was connected to with my previous work. But because of those kinds of conversations, it sort of made me more actively aware of things that I haven't really thought about in terms of making artwork for or with. So I think that's just sort of what's inspired a bit of a shift from, maybe it's not just like, oh, I love this window for me, maybe I can paint this window, but maybe it's like, well, what do windows mean in general? How can windows represent different things for different people? And what kind of windows could bring more people into a conversation versus just the window from my childhood home? And I think those were some of the mental shifts that happened, if any of that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the show, Sean.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much.
All right, we'll move on. And next we have Noreen Scott Garrity. Hi, Noreen.
Hi, and thanks, Michael and Tina. This is my first exhibition at Cerulean, so I'm really thrilled to be included. And thanks, I see some friends and family on the call tonight, so thanks for supporting me. I've been painting for over 3 decades, I would say, but more seriously in the last probably 7 to 8 years. For a very long time, I've been an arts administrator, and that sort of took me away from being a serious painter for a while. But I've been back at it, and these are from a series that I call Salem County Romantic. So they're focusing, I live in a small town in southern New Jersey called Pennsgrove in Salem County, right on the Delaware River. So a lot of these focus on the riverscape and the riverfront. For many years, I had done these kind of paintings of faraway places I might have been, but sort of with fantastic elements included. But then just a couple of years ago, I decided to focus on the local landscape, the landscape that I was familiar with, that I saw every day. And I feel like even when I wasn't painting a lot, I always painted a little. And if I was, for example, jogging on the waterfront, which I do every weekend, I feel like I was sort of making these paintings in my head for many years before I did. So then in 2021, I started this project. I'd been thinking about this for a long time, about making an artwork every day. And in 2021, I figured with the pandemic, I was working from home. There was never going to be a better time to set up watercolors on my desk while I was working. So I finally did it. And in 2021, I did a watercolor a day, posted them on Instagram. So you can go on my Instagram account and check them all out, 1 through 365. And that became a great source of inspiration and also a great work habit and a great studio practice too, I think, to sort of force myself to do something every day. And I thought that I would paint different things every day or go around the county and paint different things. But I found that I became obsessed, particularly with the Penns Grove waterfront for the most part, although I have included some of what I call my site paintings in here, including that's our barn in the backyard, which again is much more romanticized in a wolf con kind of way than it probably really is. It's really falling down. But I focused on the waterfront. There's this little area just to the south of Penns Grove where the coast dips in. It's called Helms Cove. It's got this beautiful curve to the shoreline. The light quality is incredible. Like I was even out looking at the sunset tonight. There's something about the river and the light, and when the tide is out, we get these great mud flats, which allow for paintings like this, where you have this sort of the distance. And I should tell you that the landform that you see in the distance that looks very hilly and majestic is actually a landfill in Delaware. So if there's anybody that was thinking about buying one of these, I hope that doesn't turn you off. So the idea being that to find not necessarily even just the beauty in the everyday, but even sometimes, sometimes it's, as I like to use the word, unlovely, but sort of taking that and making something of it and spending time with that place. So really living and breathing this place and this space and this light and these mud flats and the water and the ripples in the water. So focusing on elements like that. So we do these very small watercolors, which, as I said, I did one a day in 2021. I still do small watercolors, but then I also do these larger oil paintings on canvas. And I started these in 2020, actually before the watercolors, a couple of these started. So this is Helms Cove in this particular one. And this one was called Ice Sledge. It's kind of based on that famous Caspar David Friedrich painting, Sea of Ice or Polar Ice, where there's kind of this wrecked structure or this ice pushing up in the foreground, and then this sort of middle ground, and then this vast distance. So I tend to use that composition a lot. You'll see it kind of echoing. And of course, who is Caspar David Friedrich but another romantic painter? So even though I'm painting this sort of very pedestrian, well, I think it's beautiful, but many people might think this very pedestrian landscape, it's sort of taking those same qualities of light and applying them to this landscape. So what I do is I'll put a ground on each of the larger paintings, usually a sort of a warm ground. So this one had that kind of peachy ground. So then it becomes kind of both the background and the light in the painting. And then sort of allowing me this vast amount of canvas to sort of play with the shapes, and it sort of pushes and pulls, and there's thick areas and thin areas, and where the space becomes very flat. That's what's great about the mud flats. You get all these great shapes that form in the water, these pools and these wonderful shapes. And so to kind of imagine that as almost this flat plane with all of these rivulets, I believe this one is called rivulets, with all of these rivulets and things that are kind of happening as you go down the canvas. But then you'll have something like that little cube at the bottom that'll kind of pull you back into a three-dimensional space. And that's the other thing. Some of these things, the light quality and the things that you see in the paintings are not all completely made up. People say, oh, your color is so heightened. Well, the palette is heightened, but these colors actually exist in the landscape. They actually exist in the sunsets and in the dawns, all times of day that I was out photographing or painting or just looking or just kind of, as I said before, kind of ingesting the landscape. So as I said, I thought that I would get out more into the county and paint various things. And I did a little bit, but most of what I painted focuses on the Delaware River landscape, either at Pensgrove itself or at this little area. There's some of the mud flats you see there, or at this little area called Helms Cove that I really became quite obsessed with. These are two of the hot off the presses works for the show, these works on paper, also focusing on Helms Cove. I hadn't painted on largely, and these are oil and oil pastel on paper. I hadn't painted on paper in this large of a piece of paper in quite some time. And it was great to have that contrast, the hard surface versus painting on the canvas. Allows you, of course, to do different things where you can scrape into it and make these great harsh kind of lines. So these are both based on watercolors that were part of the series of 365 from 2021 that I liked enough to turn into a larger painting. And you see here again, playing with the shapes in the mud flats and with the horizon line. I think that that very dramatic line, we had just come back from seeing the Wayne Thiebaud show at the Brandywine Museum. And I think I was inspired by his sort of steep inclines there. And I was like, oh, wow, I want to do a painting that has kind of obviously I don't live in California where the hills are that steep, but I wanted to sort of show something very kind of dramatically inclined like that, even though it's a fairly flat landscape down here in Salem County. So some of the other paintings focus on, as I said, the barn structure was something that was kind of ever changing, and it's this great cedar barn. So it has these wonderful colors. It's very old, it's falling down, but it has these wonderful colors, takes on a completely different appearance in the morning versus midday versus evening. So the barn became kind of another little obsession. I call it a barn. It's really more of an old coach house. This one is called Tracks. That was another example. There's a horizon line way at the very top, which again allowed me the whole rest of the painting to play with the shapes that were formed on the mud flats by somebody running across it probably in their four-wheeler, making tracks in the sand and in the mud. And then some of the other watercolors included in the exhibition do also focus on some other aspects around town that I would call sites, where I would just kind of find interesting shapes, just to sort of get away from the fact that, yes, I do paint the river a lot, but there were some other things in the area and in the county that I also painted. So two more of the watercolors, and you'll see there again that effect I was talking about, where there will be kind of that pile of stuff in the foreground. In this case, sort of rocks and concrete, the middle ground, and then the distance. Same thing with this one, which is a little ravine that was kind of formed by concrete blocks on the waterfront. And then that top painting I took, it's called A Long December. I think I was inspired by the title of that Counting Crows song, but it was really late December, so I figured it was appropriate to the song. So I took that and made a larger painting, also called A Long December, there on the right. It's actually on 2 panels, but overall it makes it 48 by 72. And I was trying something a little bit different here. This is also on canvas, but I wanted to get more of the effects of the watercolor in oil paint. So I actually took it outside in my backyard and tried a different technique where I let the paint kind of run in the middle to form the river shapes. So there again, there's that contrast between the thinly veiled paint or washes, and then like you see there down at the bottom with the branches and with the rocks, some more drawn qualities. I do like to draw a lot, and you'll see that in the watercolors and in the paintings. leaving the drips. Some of it's heavy paint, some of it's still that ground that you can see right through. I should say too that I'm not what I consider to be a traditional watercolorist. If you look at the watercolors, I'm not a purist. They are, I do use a little bit of gouache. They are drawn into a lot because that drawn quality is very important to me too. So that is the Salem County Romantic Helms Cove series.
Noreen, are you working, what sort of reference do you work from with these? Like photograph, or are you on the spot sometimes, or what?
So it's like, I like to think of it of different parts. I will usually use some type of a photographic reference, but it's also memory. I mean, the fact that it's a very small town. Penns Grove is less than 1 square mile. So when I say that I have ingested these landscapes, I mean, they're really kind of in my being at this point. So it's kind of, I would say equal parts actual reference, like a photograph, memory, and the actual scene itself. And then in some cases, other works become the reference. So like the smaller watercolor of A Long December became the reference for the larger painting. And they're similar, but they're not exactly the same.
Thank you. It's a beautiful show, Noreen.
Thank you.
Real quick, Noreen, I wanted to say, I'm glad you said Tebow, because I was seeing Tebow in some of your landscapes. Am I getting any Richard Diebenkorn in your work? Some of your larger pieces look like Diebenkorn, not in a very, very good way.
I love Diebenkorn, so
the way you put your horizon up there, the way you abstract the landscape, I think they're gorgeous. I just want to let you know, I didn't get to see you at the show or talk to you, but I really enjoy your work so much.
And who is talking? I can't tell.
I'm Keith.
Oh, hi, Keith.
Hey.
No, I love Diebenkorn, so that's great.
Cool.
Another painter who's a huge inspiration for me is well, he lives in this country now, but a British painter named John Walker, who I absolutely love. I want to paint like him. I can't, but so thanks everybody.
Thank you. And speaking of Keith, we're at Keith Leitner's exhibition. Hello, Keith.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Mike and Tina, again for letting me into the show. And I'm very happy to be with people that are in this show. All of you are so great. I can talk a lot about all your work. I spent a lot of time with it. And Sean, thank you for spilling the beans on your marble paper. I was wondering if you did that, and I wouldn't put it past you to do that. So I'm glad you spilled the beans on that, because I was curious when I saw your work. I was just, did you do that?
Glad to help.
Yeah. So my name is Keith Leitner. I'm a painter. I say I'm landscape. I don't always, my landscape kind of zoom in, zoom out. The abstract pieces you're looking at right now are oil on paper, and they're very material based. There's a lot of me beating out of these paintings to see what I can get out of them. There's a lot of sanding, a lot of layers. They take a really, really long time. I don't add anything to them. They're straight up oil painting. And I really enjoy texture. And I spent a lot of time experimenting with additives to add to paint, but at the end of the day, just paint on top of paint gives me what I want. I really dig it. And I don't have these are straight up abstraction. I just start. I don't know what these are going to look like when I start. There is no reference to these, and at the end of the day, when I'm done with them, I title them there. There's no working titles, and I just look and see. And it's actually a lot of fun. And actually, Mike and Tina are the ones who made me title my works, because for the longest time, all my works were untitled. And Mike told me I was it was a cop out. So I've learned the hard way. I've never looked back. So thank you, Mike and Tina.
Well, customers like a title too. So
I do appreciate that. No, it's become a huge deal. It's become a lot of fun, actually, at the end of the day, to sit down and say, okay, what is this about? Because I don't have any references. And some people look at the show that I have posted up and they're like, did two people actually do this work? No, it's just me. The pieces you're looking at now are studio based and they're inside, and the other ones are one-off plein air watercolors that I do. It's a dichotomy, you know, the ones on the abstract oils and paper take months literally, and these take me an hour and a half to 2 hours each. And these are all places that I love dearly. They're land preserves, nature spots that I go to, and that I really, really love. And I spent out this over the summer, starting July through September. I just went out almost every week and did tons of watercolors. And I pulled these up for the show. I had not worked this way for a very long time. I am a self-taught watercolorist. I started over 20 years ago, I taught myself. And I haven't done any plein air for a very long time. I teach watercolor, but I teach still life. And my studio work is pure, you know, non-referential. So to go back out into the landscape after a long time and working abstractly really helped me. After such a long time out, the hiatus didn't hold me back. I actually came back with more appreciation of the material I'm working with. I used to be very tight. I would draw every leaf, and I was very, very hard. And these are much more free and allowing the watercolor to do the work for me and become really, really lazy. And they were a blast to do. I was extremely happy doing these. And I just, that's about the extent of it. It's just something I wanted to do, and I had an awful lot of fun doing them.
So who do you think about when you're painting with watercolor? You've mentioned some artists. Oh,
yeah. My go-to is John Singer Sargent. Sargent did watercolors around the time he was in his 40s, right after 1901 or 2. He did a whole body of watercolors over like several thousand. And they're right now, they reside mostly in the Boston Museum of Fine Arts in Brooklyn. They are stunning. I just saw the show in DC. They had an early piece. I think he was 12 years old. The first watercolor they had posted there, they had hung up, and he hit his stride in the early around the turn of the 20th century. And you can see him really riffing. He had a ball doing them. I mean, he had kind of he was kind of over his portraits. And he just was traveling and enjoying what he was seeing and enjoying painting what he saw. And he's been an inspiration ever since. His palette, his use of materials, the drawing that he included, because his drawings, there's drawing in his watercolors. The drawing informs the watercolor very much. And his watercolors go far beyond the image you see, and that's what I strive for in my watercolors. I want you to, it's an image, I want you to get up in there and really look and see what's going on, because there's a lot of cool things that watercolor does if you can let it do what it wants to do. And that's why I enjoy this. But yeah, Sargent is my go-to. Eileen Goodman is a Philadelphia watercolorist who I really, really love. There are so many I could go on, but Eileen Goodman's watercolors, if you don't know, you should check them out at Woodmere, because they're absolutely stunning. She's a master, and her watercolors are absolutely virtuosic. That's the only word I can use to see her work. And Homer, Winslow Homer, of course.
So
this is actually on Fire Island on Long Island. This is looking back into Long Island across the Great South Bay. This is a place called Sailor's Haven.
Keith, can you describe the different mindset you have from working on the abstract pieces and these? I mean, are the plein air pieces like a relief from the oils, or vice versa, or what?
They are relief in a way that I don't have to like pull something out of nowhere. Although I'm kind of lazy there because the materials let me know what's going on. The abstractions are all material based. This I've got something in front of me to look at, but it gives me excuse to use watercolors. I'm not trying to be photographic. These are not necessarily true to life, but they are inspired by something that I see.
And you're teaching a workshop in January, yes, called Painting Without Fear.
Good luck with that. Painting without fear, yes.
Is there such a thing?
And these three watercolors. I hadn't done. I usually work with oil. These are watercolors. I tried to see how saturated I could get with the watercolor. And this one's actually oil pastel and watercolor. This was kind of fun. I was trying to. It's called Necco wafer. The color, and I didn't just go in thinking Necco wafer. I just when I was done, I was like, "What is this about?" What I call it Necco wafer.
So you go back and put the titles on, like after your...
Yeah, I go back when it's over with. Yeah, and these two, this is Saturation Dawn. Just trying to see how dense the watercolor could make it. And this one, I keep telling people, I went through an entire tube of manganese watercolor, and after the fact, I realized they don't make it anymore. They quit. Yeah, you can't get it anymore. So I'm still looking if I can find it any place, but. And these were just fun. These are just me sitting there trying to play with some color, trying to do like a tonal shift from the blue to red. I was thinking of some other painters who do that, but just playing around. They were a lot of fun. So,
thank you, Keith.
thank you.
And next we come to Alicia Mino Gonzalez. Hello, Alicia.
Hi everyone. My name is Alicia. Sorry that I'm wearing a mask, but we have some coughing weird thing going on at home, so we have to be careful. My husband is coughing on the other side, so we have to wear mask. So I am from Chile. I moved to the United States kind of 16 years ago. I was living in Italy with my husband and son. I studied in my country visual communication, and I've been painting and drawing since I was 10 years old. But I learned a lot in Italy. I really learned a lot. And I started to paint more kind of seriously there and showing every year. I'm sorry. And so a lot of practice there. When I moved to United States, I got the chance to participate in a couple of exhibitions. The street gallery, I became member, and I began to try to make my way as an artist here in Philadelphia. And basically, I live, my living is by teaching. I teach everywhere in Papa, Fleischer, Cerulean, and Mainland Center. And when I have some time off, I try to paint and do some mixed media like this one, this kimono that is entirely made of paper. Was really hard to do it. When I began the project, I didn't realize how hard was to sew paper. But I wasn't there already, so I asked my sister and my mom to help me to hold the paper in the meantime that I was sewing. It was really fun. I paint the paper first. I decorated. Everything that you see is painted by hand, and I got a lot of fun doing this. This kimono is part of a series of pieces dedicated to the discovery of the tea. How the tea was discovered by this scholar, Lu Jun. and he was also an emperor in China, and he was boiling water to kind of, he knew about the bacteria, so he was boiling the water under a little tree, and he didn't realize that a couple of leaves, they end up into the water and change the color of the water and the smell of the water. So he decided to try, and he discovered the tea, and then he began to study all kind of tea and their medicinal properties. And it's an amazing, beautiful story. And so I got really engaged in that, and I create mixed media pieces and about the story of the tea, how the tea also began to be popular and end up in England, and from there become something popular for everyone. Everyone wants to drink tea. So as you can see, those are tea cakes that I asked somebody to bring from China. So these people used to carry the tea leaves and mules, but it was really dangerous because the mule, they used to fall from the mountain. So they discovered that hydrating the tea leaves and then put it in mold and then squeezing and taking all the water, they can create these cakes that they can carry it in an easy way, and they can carry more. So this was a really important discovery, and they began to decorate those cakes with different symbols. That one is the blossom tree, and the right. The next one that you will see is the horse. It's a horse, which is a symbol of tea. This is a mixed media, so I use paper, I use the tea, I use silk. So I wave the silk, the paper together, and I create these mixed media pieces. Paper also from Tibet and other places, interesting places. So this one is the one that I was talking about. Is the horse, the tea horse, which is a symbol of the tea in China. And it's a really old 2,000 years ago symbol that has been used in time, and they keep creating this mold with that symbol. Then the other part of the show are those paintings that you see. This one, which is the Mongol king or eagle king. I was talking with some people, and we was discussing how important it is to keep the legacy of their culture. And I decided to create a little exhibition about how important it is for us to let me give you a brief explanation on this. The problem is that young people, they are emigrating from villages, cities, and countries to other more developed countries in order to get opportunity, job opportunity, education, etc., etc. And they are losing, and we are losing, because I'm as a Chilean, I'm losing also the legacy of my my culture, my native culture. So we were discussing this, how it's terrible to think that those young generation that they are immigrating, they're not going to be able to continue to study their culture and their legacy and learn about it and pass it to their families, their kids, etc., etc. So I decided to create this painting as a kind of open conversation with the audience in order to give a point of start in this conversation, how we can help this culture, how we can help a young generation to keep the culture, to keep learning and practicing this ritual that they are rich in spiritual meanings and also so respectful to the nature and the wildlife, the animals. They are example for us on how we should live in harmony with the nature in the earth. So my proposal is to learn about this culture. That one in particular is the Borneo Island in Indonesia, where these young warriors that dance like birds, and they make sounds like a toucans. And all the bones that you see in the top of the feathers in the chest are like the bones of the toucan. And when they dance, they dance like a bird, and they make the same sound as the toucan. So, and they live, and they try to portray the life of the toucan as an example of harmony with the nature. So the same as with the Mongol king, there used to be thousands of people that they used to train this bird for hunting, and now it's only kind of 150 people left that they have this culture. They try to keep this culture legacy and teach other people, other young people to do it, but it's only a few of them that they keep in teaching and training the hawks for hunting. So same happened with this beautiful princess, is the fire guardian from Philippines. So Philippines has so many different islands, and every little island has a little culture belong to the entire country, but they have different characteristics. And also they are really into respect of the land, the culture, the music, the dance, etc., etc. So my the theme basically is I am hoping that this is an initiation for a conversation about how important are to keep these different cultures alive, and how they make our world richer and more spiritual.
So Alicia, can you talk a little bit about your painting technique for these?
I used to be really photorealistic painter, but getting older, I'm getting far from there. I don't have any more the time to spend like a year in one painting. So I have, my paintings are trying to portray a little bit of the realism, but I also am trying to get more into fantastic realism or magical realism. And I'm trying to, if you notice in the back of the painting also are symbols of those cultures. And so I'm trying to incorporate in the painting collage, their paper, their gold leaf, and I'm trying to incorporate different elements to the painting that they going to, I'm hoping that they're going to keep developing this technique. By the end, it's going to be more abstract and more rich in the background. More rich expression of different things, and and I hoping that I can get the balance, good balance in between the realism and these magical elements that I'm trying to build up in my mind, and studying and making research about cultures and expression and et cetera, and like kids, I'm really into texture. I really love texture, so more and more I'm trying to incorporate that to my paintings and mixed media and whatever I'm doing. It's so fun, relaxing, and intriguing, right? To try to discover new texture, new colors, and new waving things, etc., etc. Yeah.
This is one of your trompe l'oeil pieces, yes?
Of the trompe l'oeil that I used to do before, yeah, more like into super realism, or more like, yeah.
And they're oil, yes?
It's oil, yes. Well, all the paintings in the gallery are oil. It's just that this is pure oil. The other ones, they have like different elements, paper, and et cetera, too. So, yeah.
And you teach too, yes? It's very important to your practice.
Yes. I teach drawing, painting, and mixed media collage as well. So I'm trying to do what I preach. No, I teach what I like to do and what I know what to do. Yeah.
It's a beautiful show. Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And next we have Laura Eyring. Hello, Laura.
Hello. Thank you for putting this together. And it's always, I always feel a bit like a fish out of water talking about my work, because it's language, I would say, is not my forte. So it's funny to put like what I'm used to doing very effortlessly or easily, all of a sudden to put words to it. But I would say my work is all about color. Everything in this show and everything I've done pretty much the past 4 or 5 years has been landscape. And most of this is inspired by the Wissahickon, which is right near my home. I'm no longer doing plein air. I just got lugging the easel and the oil paints out into the field and picking out the bugs. I don't know. I guess I'm getting too old for that at this point. So my practice is to do a lot of sketches, really fast, messy pencil or pen sketches, and then take a lot of pictures. And then I work from black and white photographs, so that when I'm working with the color, it's not all that based on reality. It's more what I was feeling at the time. And so I'll just say a little bit about the one on the left. I call Dancing Trees. And while I was quarantined last year for 2 weeks, I decided to start designing my own frames. And this is one of them. And I was looking at a lot of Asian style roofs, Chinese and traditional Japanese roofs. And this is one of the shapes I came up with for making frames. And I made one of them myself with guidance from the Manayunk woodworking shop. And then I decided it was woodworking wasn't something I was going to take on. And so now I give designs to the woodworkers and the carpenters at the Manayunk studio, and they cut them, and then I stain them and put them together. This one is called Lighten Up, because I looked at a lot of my work together and realized my colors tend to get kind of dark. So I wanted a lighter, more, just a little levity to the color there. And so part of my process is I pretty much only buy red, yellow, and blue, with a couple of, exceptions. The occasional purple, the occasional orange, and then I'm mixing everything. I spent over an hour mixing colors. These are all oil. So then my palette lasts me for 3 or 4 days. But I've worked that way because I feel like all the colors then are automatically unified in some way. They all relate to each other much more easily than if I were to go out and buy a lot of different tubes and try and get that to harmonize. I think I'd have a harder time with it. So I start with a canvas that I tone in acrylic, and usually either a bright orange or fuchsia. Sometimes I go to the other end and do like a teal or a turquoise. This one, you can see bits of the underpainting there, that kind of reddish pinkish in certain parts. And then when I'm applying paint, I'm working really fast, and I always have loud music going to kind of drown out my critical voice of what in the world are you doing? Instead, I can kind of get rid of that and dive into the moment. And then I like to think of how I apply paint is like creating a mosaic. This is pretty much all one layer. I don't go back over and layer and redo. So it's not quite a one-shot painting for all these, but in the first 2 hours, it's usually about 80 or 90% done. And then I'm just going back and kind of adding a little, just a heavier quality to the paint. But especially in this one, you can kind of see how it looks like a mosaic. It's, and this is actually from the Mount Cuba Arboretum, which is a beautiful spot if you haven't been down. It's down near Delaware, might actually be in Delaware. It's a really lovely arboretum. So I also, my studio is my laundry room, and I don't work in oil unless it's warm enough for me to open the back door to the garden and have all the fans going, which is pretty much April through October. So April through October, I paint like a crazed maniac. And then once it's too cold, I just switch for the rest of the year and I'm doing drawing. And I miss the oil terribly. Sometimes I'll get, like, if we get a warm week in February or not so much in January, that doesn't happen too often, but I'll start doing more sketches. But for the most part, I'm painting like crazy for about 7 months of the year. And then the rest of the time is drawing, which, the drawing really helps your painting. So I can play around with compositions and do some studies from life. So this top one is the frame that I made with an instructor in the workshop. And I like the way it turned out. And I'm really big on the arts and crafts movement of this earlier in the like the 1910s to the 1930s, the Art Deco period, the arts and crafts movement. I love that style. And they were drawing from Asian influence as well. So when I designed the frames, I was kind of thinking what would complement the work and the feel, and kind of going back. One of my favorite painters is Gustav Klimt, who was very much in that same genre of painters. And I love what he says about just wanting to create beauty. And so when I look at a landscape, or when I think about a landscape, I'm just thinking of not so much painting where I was, but painting where I want to be, idealizing that setting by working with the color to make something that really feels like an escape, like you can look at it and get lost in the color. And so I get farther and farther away from realism and wanting to just kind of glance at my reference picture and then toss it away and then have fun with the color. And so like this one, I call it March Trio because of the 3 main trees, but this is almost completely from imagination. I wanted to have the really dark silhouette of the trees and the blue shadows of the trees on the bottom against the yellow and the purples in the background.
So Laura, can you talk a bit about your career path? It's an interesting.
It's a jagged line too. So my background is, my whole family was classical music. My dad was in the Philly Orchestra. He was the first trumpet for many, many years. And we all studied classical music from a ridiculously young age. And it was, you know, the music, I took a year off high school to decide whether I was going to do piano or art, painting. So I took a gap year. And I took one night class at the academy during that gap year, and then I was waitressing and I was studying piano. And boy, within about 5 minutes of being inside the academy, I was like, oh, I know where I want to be. And so the following year, I pretty much stopped playing piano altogether for 20 years. I just needed a break, but I loved the academy, and so I was there 4 years. And then I did the program 2 years at University of Pennsylvania for your academics and got the BFA. And then, you know, I was waitressing, cleaning houses, walking dogs. And my favorite job, I was the body at a massage class, a massage school. And then when I was in my early 30s, I really needed a job with benefits and needed to make a change. So I took a class. I thought, oh, you know, I'll become a vet. That would be my second choice, like having absolutely no idea what veterinary medicine involves, thinking it would be, you know, very fun to have a few cats and dogs around. And so I took biology at community college, and with a private tutor and tons of work, I barely made a B. And then, you know, I was getting really depressed, but I had already signed up and paid for chemistry and a math class for the following semester. And I took chemistry and everything clicked. And it was, you know, from there, you know, went full time for the rest of my chemistry at community, and then transferred and got a scholarship to Drexel and got a chemistry degree. And it was funny because I thought, oh, this would be like 2 years. Well, you know, art history and printmaking don't transfer to organic chemistry and physics 1. So it was starting over. It was a whole 4 years to go. So now I work, and since for about the past 20 years, I work as a chemist at the water department doing water testing, where I met my husband, who's also a chemist. And now we have 2 teenagers. So it's really a good time because with, you know, teenagers, they don't really need you or want you around. So I have a lot more time to paint. And, you know, I'm probably about 6 or 7 years away from retirement. And then I'm going to be, hopefully, knock on wood, painting full time. But, you know, for now, it's, I think so many painters, you know, need to pull a second gig to make it work. And what that does too is my work tends to get tight. And so when I don't have a lot of time, it forces me to be quick and loose and get right to the point and not obsess and not, you know, I don't have time to kind of decide whether I like it or I don't, or it's good or it's not good, or what am I doing? It's much more immediate. And I think that's been a really positive, you know, positive thing to be kind of having to resolve in some way, that the time is short, and so you have to just, you know, have your idea and then go for it full force with no time to for doubts. And
So
I was just gonna say, I really had fun putting these together and just trying to, you know, to have a unified show. And it's always nice to see the work up and see it out of the laundry room and see it on the walls and not stacked everywhere.
So does your science background influence your outlook on painting?
It gives me a really healthy respect for solvents. So, you know, get your ventilation, your HVAC system, make sure that's up to par. Part of this too was 5 years ago, I had cancer. And when I finished with all the cancer treatment, it was what do I really want to do? And it was getting back to oil painting. And so right after about a year after cancer treatment was when I started with Cerulean. And then again, it was just kind of like, wow, life is so short and we just have so little time, and trying to make the most of that time and find what you're really hone in your skills and try to create the work you're dreaming of.
Thank you, Laura. It's a beautiful show.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for putting this together.
Of course, it's our pleasure.
Can I say something, Mike, before?
Yes.
Laura, my jaw was dropping when I saw your work, and beautiful. And I couldn't read and feel the quantity of hour that you put on this. And I felt the love that you have for this. I feel it. So congratulations, because it's an amazing work. I really love it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's so nice to hear.
Yeah.
Thanks again to all the artists. We'll take this spotlight off. It was a great talk. And thanks everyone for coming. Hope you have a great night and have a happy holiday.
Thank you. Good night. Thanks.
Happy
Thank
holiday.
you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.